Okay, we are meeting to review the new monthly financial statements. Amanda, over to you.
Um, okay, yeah, so the purpose is, to review the updated financial statements, collect any input that you all have on them, and answer any questions that you may have. So it's kind of a lot of information. I'll start, the pages are in order in how we will go over them. So we can just start with that first page, which is the general fund revenue. So what you're looking at is a it's basically from our fiscal year starts July 1, ends June 30th. So you're looking at from July 1 through December 31st, because we're always going to go through the last day of the month, obviously. So we really liked these financial statements because what they do is they give you a little more info about what you're looking at. So these particular ones give you 2 prior years of exactly where we were with revenue in each of these particular sources, the local, state, and all other sources at this point in time last year and at this point in time 2 years ago. So it gives you a little bit of a better idea about where we really are and kind of what that means. So up at the top, year-to-date local sources, you see that 4.755 number. What that's saying is that we have collected from July 1st of 2025 through December 31st of 2025, we have collected $4,755,609 in local sources. So that's going to be your taxes, basically. And so that is 88% of what we budgeted. Now that sounds like a lot so far at this point in the year, but it's really not because it's pretty much right on target because we actually just collected the November payment for taxes, which, as everybody knows who owns a home, now is when property taxes come in and you pay your property taxes. So those have just now been dispersed to school districts last month. So we're pretty much right on par for that. Going over to the right, year-to-date state sources, 2.8 million. That's 59% of what we budgeted. Going over a little farther to the right, year-to-date all other sources. So that is going to include our beginning fund balance and any of the 2,000 and 4,000 sources of revenue as well. So any intermediate revenue and any federal revenue into the general fund, which we don't get a lot of. So what you're looking at in these graphs is if you start with that local sources, so you're looking at that yellow line that says 4,551,911. So that is what we had collected in 2024 at this point in the year. And then so on, you can kind of go over 2025, we had collected 4.722, and 2026, right now, we collected 4.755. So you can kind of see our local sources, are fairly flat. We've increased a little bit, which is good. State sources, same exact format. And then all other sources, same exact format. And in all other sources, you see it going the opposite direction. We collected more in the 2 years prior, a little bit less last year, and less this year. And that's coming from the beginning fund balance lowering each year, as we expected. So that's why you see the decrease there. Yes, it's because our beginning fund balance each year has been going down. So 2023, it was like 5.2 million. And then 2024, it was 4.6. And then now this year, it was 3.6. So each year, our beginning fund balance is going down. Yes. Yes, that is correct.
Is some of that the federal money that is decreasing, or is that going to show up next year?
Federal money is, so this is general fund. So you will see that hit the general fund, but more so federal funds are going to be in the 200. So the special revenues like the title funds, things like that, which is outside of the general revenue. However, when federal funds go down, say we get less in title, then we're going to have to spend more in general funds. So it is going to impact. And yes, we did receive less federal funds in special revenue this year. So we have had to, spend a little bit more in general fund to help make up for that, if that makes sense. Did I answer that question? Okay. Okay, so going down a little bit, same page. I'm just going to briefly try and touch on these things. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just talks about year-to-date amount, current amount, what the annual budget is, and what percentage of the budget that we have, the budgeted amount that we have collected for that. So, for instance, in that local revenue, you see that we've collected 93%. That again, that's only because we just got our local taxes. So that's where we would expect to be right now for that, which is great. Moving down, there's local revenue, intermediate revenue, state revenue, federal revenue. So these are the ones that are going into the general fund of these items. So local revenue would be your taxes. Intermediate revenue would be your county school funds, your heavy equipment fees that we receive, which aren't much. And then any state or state revenue or federal revenue that goes in there. Going down, so this is to answer the question a little bit more, beginning fund balance. This is where you see the past history of our beginning fund balances. So in the previous year, our beginning fund balance was 4.6 million. This year, 3.6 million. So that's why you see that graph up at the upper right-hand side going downward. So no, good question. The other revenue, so you see other revenue and it says 77,290 for current year-to-date amount. What that is, this is kind of a special situation. What that is a payment from PACE, our insurance company, from when Harbor Lights gym floor was flooded. So PACE gives us, they gave us money towards helping to fix that. And this is where the auditor wanted that coded, is into other revenue. And as you'll see on the next page, you'll see where that went out to pay for the gym payment. But that is what that 77,000 is. Good question. So we went over the beginning fund balance and then total resources right underneath there. That just tells you the total resources last year. We had collected $11,935,000 and $20. This year, to date, we collected $11,357,671. So a little bit lower as we expect. And then moving down, this is one thing I wanted to highlight with these particular financial statements is you see this revenue insight. Does everybody see where that is? These are fantastic. It kind of explains a little bit about what you're seeing here. So this is telling you the general fund source 5,400 has been removed. So 5,400 is our beginning fund balance. So it's removing that, and then it's giving you insight on what you're reading from above. So it's saying general fund, beginning fund balance removed. Here's what you're seeing. Here's the changes you're seeing. So it's saying year-to-date revenues totaled $7,694,881 through December of 2025, which is $421,376, or 5.5% more than the amount received last year for this period. The year-to-date difference is driven by, and it tells you, this is what I love about these, driven by an increase in 300 to 399 state sources, which is our state school fund, an increase in the 5,000 to 599 objects of 77,290, and again, that's that payment from PACE that we received for the gym floor, and an increase in 1,000 to 199 local sources, which is our local taxes. So I really love this portion of it because it gives you a little bit of insight on, what it is you're looking at and explains it a little bit more. So moving down, this is something else I wanted to point out here. You see general fund balance down at the bottom. Previous year, so last year at this point in time, our general fund current balance was $7,423,736. This year at this point in time, it is $6,967,498. So that seems like a large number, which again, it's not, because we just received that the local taxes. So we just received that big bulk of money to get us through to the end of the year. So that's going to be going down each month. When you see this, it's going to be going down. So we're at the point right now where it looks nice, but it won't last, unfortunately. So yeah, I did want to point that out. That will not be our ending fund balance. That is what we are at currently right now. Okay, I think that's it for that page, unless anybody has any questions on the revenue portion. Good. Okay, moving on to the next page. Same exact. Sure, yeah.
When you say that this will be going down the current year to date amount, is that going to go down in the amount that we approve to pay at the board meetings? Or will it be going down in other ways as well? You know, when we pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
Sure, I
keep
understand.
that.
It'll be going down based upon what has been appropriated by the board. So any expenditures that have been already approved by the board, for instance, at the beginning when you adopt the budget, you adopt at certain appropriations. So you'll adopt each level, like 1,000, 2,000. So 1,000 would be like all of the salaries for instructional purposes, and then 2,000s would be all of the, we'll go over all that, but it's going to go down based upon what has been appropriated to spend. So mainly like salaries and consumable supplies and all of that. It's not gonna, did I answer your question?
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Because I think we can see that go down as we pay the bills each month.
Exactly.
Almost in that exact amount.
Exactly. Yes. You're exactly right. Okay, so the next page, general fund expenses. And like I said, same format. So up in the upper right-hand side, you'll see year-to-date salaries and benefits. $3,536,424, and that is currently 33% of what we budgeted. That does not include encumbrances, meaning what we need to pay in salaries and benefits throughout the rest of the year. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. And then over to the right a little bit, year-to-date purchased services. We're at 32% of the budget, and then year-to-date supplies and materials, 27% of the budget. So going down to those graphs, again, you have your 2 years, your 2 prior years for context, kind of showing where we were. If you look at that to the far left, that orange color, 2024, that is where we were with salaries and benefits. Going over to the right in the gray, and then over to the right one more, 2026. So as you can see, salaries and benefits are, as expected, going up each year. 300 purchase services. That's kind of, been up and down here and there, but and supplies and materials, as expected, those are going up. So going down a little bit to the salaries, it shows you exactly the salaries where we were previously, which at this point last year we had spent 1.8 million. Now we're at 1.9 million. Going down a little bit, benefits. It talks about retirement, which would be PERS, employee insurance, which is our OEB, and then all other benefits, which is, like our paid leave Oregon, our unemployment, Medicare, et cetera. So that's what those are, and where we were last year, where we are this year. Other expenditures. So purchase services, what those include, that's our water, electricity, garbage, audit services, travel budgets, anything like that is in purchase services. So supplies and materials, that's pretty self-explanatory. Capital outlay. So here's where, because generally we don't have a lot of capital outlay in the general fund. But this year we do. You see 61,271 there. That is because that was the final amount of payment that we needed to pay for the Harbor Lights gym floor. So generally, you won't see a lot of capital outlay in the general fund, but this year, because of how the auditors want it recorded, you see that there. So that's what that is. So, and it does show, obviously well over budget, which is okay. That's where our auditors wanted that coded. So we're good there. Other objects. So that would be like our liability insurance, our dues and fees that schools and everyone needs to pay for certain things. And then transfers. So this year, we budgeted $432,819 for transfers. So that would mean a transfer from the general fund to another fund. And generally that's going to be either a 200 fund, which is special revenue fund, or to like a capital projects or something. So this year in the adopted budget, we have budgeted transfers to food service, which we do every year because our food service, we don't get enough revenue to cover it. So we have to transfer out of the general fund to food service to cover that deficit. And then the other thing that was budgeted was for transportation equipment fund, which we have in Fund 220. And that is to go towards bus payments, interest, anything having to do with transportation vehicles. Going down contingencies. This year we have budgeted $415,201 for contingencies. That is something we hopefully will never have to touch. That's just for emergency purposes. So fingers crossed, that's just going to stay right where it's at. And then we'll be able to budget for whatever we can afford to budget there next year. And then, so again, in the same format, you see that expense insights down at the bottom. So general fund year-to-date expenses totaled $4,390,173 through December of 2025, which is $121,111 or 2.8% less than the amount spent last year for this period. The year-to-date difference is driven by a decrease in 700 to 799 transfers of 408,405 and an increase in salaries of 105,000 and an increase in other objects of 72,000. So I'll explain what those are. So the starting up at the top, so the year-to-date difference driven by 700 to 799 transfers of 408,405. What that is that 408,000 that was budgeted the prior year for a transfer from the general fund that was special revenue in the general fund that needed to be transferred out of the general fund because it's restricted revenue, special revenue. So that got transferred last year at the beginning of the year to Fund 254, which is where it still is. So there are a bunch of different donation type grants in there. So that's what that 408,000 is. And then an increase in salaries of 105,000, that's self-explanatory. And then an increase in 600 to 699 other objects of 72,743. And what that is mainly liability insurance. Like our insurance went up quite a bit this year for, through PACE. It's, all for buildings and vehicles and all of that. So that was the main driving factor for the increase there. Any questions on this page? Okay. All right, moving on. This one I'll go over a little bit more quickly, but what this is this is showing you a revenue breakdown in the general fund with just a little bit more detail. So this page and the next page, this is what I've been doing every month, and I give this to Shauna and we kind of go over it, any questions. And it just kind of breaks it down in a little bit more detail so we can see where we are with each of these functions. So this is revenue for, current year's taxes, prior year's taxes, interest, et cetera. You can kind of just go down and you can see exactly what was budgeted, what was collected year to date, what's projected to be collected, and then the total. So I like this sheet This is just one I've done since I've started this job, because you can kind of play around with it a little bit with what you're projecting. So say for instance, we have an adjustment in the state school fund, and we need to think like, okay, we have a decrease in students. We know we're going to be getting less money in the state school fund. We can estimate for that and project. So that way at the end of the year, we're not slammed with a big, $200,000 or $300,000 deficit in the state school fund payment. So this kind of just helps us project where we are, what's going on with the revenue, and what we're expecting in the future. So going down at the bottom, the only other thing I wanted to point out on this page is you see down at the bottom other sources, and then you see 5,400 twice. Does everybody see where that one is? So the top one, it says beginning cash fund 100 and beginning cash fund 101. So beginning fund cash 100, that's just our normal general fund. Several years ago, it was broken out, I believe, for the first time in the 23-24 budget. 200,000 was moved to Fund 101 for curriculum rotation. So that way, the district always had that little bit set aside because curriculum is extremely expensive, and there's not always room for it when we need to adopt new curriculum. So that was something that was done in 23-24 to just kind of help plan for that a little bit better. So that's what Fund 101 is, and $200,000 is there currently. So with the beginning fund balance total in the general fund, 100 and 101, those two add up to the 3.6 million that you saw on the prior sheets. So those two are broken out there just so we can keep track of those. If we end up spending money in Fund 101, then it'll track, exactly where we are with that. So as you can see, the budget, 13,518,241. That's our budgeted revenues. And you'll see on the next page, that's also our budgeted expenditures because those have to match in budget. So moving on to the next page, it looks very similar, but this is the expenditures that are broken down kind of same way. We have, instruction. So we have primary, elementary, middle, junior high, high school, etc. You can see how the instruction functions are broken down there, what we budgeted, where we are year to date, what's been encumbered in those functions, meaning any salaries, benefits, anything that we're expected to pay throughout the year, those have been encumbered. So we don't get a big surprise. We track those. So at the beginning of the year, all payroll possible is encumbered. We're always going to get timesheets and, extra things for activities. So not everything is going to be there, but we do our best to encumber everything that we know of. And that way we can, plan better for the end of the year. So that's what encumbered is. Requisitions, those are just purchases or fees, anything that's been encumbered or anything that's in the requisition process and it hasn't quite become an actual encumbrance yet. So sometimes you'll see something in there. That just means it's going to be encumbered. And then you'll see, the total, that's everything. So that's going to take your year-to-date amount, the encumbered amount, and the requisitions, and that's going to be your total encumbered amount. And then this is the most important thing I think I wanted to point out on this sheet to you all, is that when we do, when you adopt the budget each year, you adopt it at the function level. So you'll adopt it. The appropriations are 1,000 levels, 2,000 levels, 3,000 levels, etc. So that's what the auditor looks at each year. Are you guys staying for the general fund? And they do this for each fund. But so for the general fund, are you staying within what the board appropriated for the 1,000 levels, for the 2,000 levels, for every level? So that's what they look at. They don't look at each tiny line item. They look at the instruction, for instance, so all your 1,000s. So you'll see over to the right here, committed 76.5% of instruction in the general fund has been committed, meaning it's been encumbered. We know we're going to spend that, and it's probably majority on salary and benefits. However, that is what we need to watch. So if that gets up over 100%, then we're going to need to do either a supplement, depending on how much over, either a supplemental budget, or we're going to have to do some sort of resolution to, move some appropriations from like a 2,000 level to a 1,000 level, or vice versa. So this is what we kind of go over each month and just make sure, like, are we staying within what the board appropriated to spend? So this is one of my favorite tracking sheets. So as you can see, 76% committed for the instruction level, 1,000s, 79.54% for the 2,000 levels, et cetera. You can kind of go down. So right now we're in fine shape as far as what was appropriated. So I think this is an important sheet for all of you to kind of just look at and kind of see where are we as far as what was appropriated, and do we need to start looking at something? Do we need, or, are we getting close to going over in instruction or debt service or something like that? So I really like this one. So speaking of debt service, down at the bottom there, so debt service in the general fund, that's going to be copier contracts. Transfer of funds, that's what I was talking about earlier, that $432,819 transfer of funds that was budgeted. That's the budgeted transfer that we were talking about that would go to food service and transportation equipment as needed. So that's what that is. And then, as said before, the operating contingency, we don't touch that. We leave that alone unless it's an emergency. And we have one more. Any questions on the expenditures page? No? Okay. All right. So last but not least, we are on to, this would be our, this helps track our special revenue, so grant funds, and then our debt service and our capital project fund. So what you're looking at here is over to the left, you see the fund number. So for instance, starting at the top, Title I is 201. And it just gives you a little information about, the ending date of that grant, the grant amount, grant CO, that's carryover. So what this is saying is that this year for Title I, the grant amount, the 25-26 grant amount that we received was $387,069, but we had $12,870.89 of carryover from Title I from the prior year, which we try to have a little bit of carryover to get us through that first part until we get that first disbursement. So that's good. And then amount, that's just adding those two together. So in Title I funds this year, that $399,876 is what we're dealing with for this year. And then going over to the right a little bit, you see year-to-date revenue. That means grant claims that we've placed and ODE has reimbursed us. Projected, that's just projecting what we are going to receive in grant claims for Title I this year. And then going over to the right a little bit farther, we have year-to-date expenditures. So you see that $133,880.79. That's how much has been spent in Title I year-to-date. Expenditures encumbered, that's exactly what we were talking about from the prior sheets. That's going to be your salaries, benefits, purchases that aren't fully closed out yet. So anything that's been encumbered but not yet paid. And then over to the right, you see the balance. So for instance, in Title I, $23,148.39. So that's what we have right now left over in Title I after you take into account everything that's been encumbered. Because we always want to think, okay, well, we know we have certain people charged to Title I. We know that, per their contract or, per the way the year is going to go, this is what we are going to be paying them. So once all that is said and done, the balance that we have left over to either add something to the grant budget, because there's, especially in Title I, there are certain other things that you can potentially charge there if you end up having enough overage. Or you can plan for how you're going to use that for carryover for the next year. So you can properly plan and get through until you get that first disbursement of Title I. So we do want to have a little bit of a carryover if possible at the end of this year for that. So it just kind of depends on what grant you're looking at, whether you want to balance. So for instance, if you go down a little bit to like early literacy, for instance. You know what? Let's not do that one. Let's do this one. So student investment account. That's one of our big ones, SIA. So that's Fund 217. You see the end date of 6/30/2026. So that one at the end of this year, we want that to be 0 because it's ending. We're not going to leave a penny on the table if we can avoid it. So certain grants we want to be totally zeroed out at the end of the year and get to wherever we can possibly use them and benefit from them. For students, programs, etc. And then there are other grants where you kind of need to strategically plan, hopefully for a little bit of carryover to get you through. So so the top part, those are our grants, and over to the right in notes, we've made some notes just talking a little bit about what those grants are used for. So that helps explain so you can kind of see where those funds are going. Going down a little bit more, non-ODE funds. So non-ODE funds would be our transportation equipment replacement fund, which I've talked about a couple times that we budget transfers there sometimes. That's for our buses and vans, etc. Food service, self-explanatory. Student body funds, 250. So that's where we have all 3 schools. That's the fund that all 3 of the schools' student body funds is under. And then we have the donation funds. So Ocean Crest, their fund number for donation 251, Harbor Lights 252, etc. And then that 254, that's where that 408,000 was budgeted and transferred back in 24, at the very beginning of 24-25, to get those out of the general fund, as recommended by the auditor. So so that's those. And then below a little bit, we have debt service, which is Fund 300. That is the account that we use to pay our debt service out of. So it's just anything, any principal and interest towards the bond is where that comes from. And then capital projects fund. So that includes our capital projects and our bond. They're both in Fund 400. And consequently, I just talked to our auditor about this. And they said, perfect, like we can do this. Fund 400 right now has both of those in it. So it was recommended to me by somebody else to potentially split them. So that way it's easier to track. So the bond would be in Fund 400 and then our capital projects would be in Fund 410. So the auditor thought that was a good idea and said we could do it. We have not done that yet, but that's something that may in the future happen for easier tracking of interest and expenditures, etc. But yeah, other than that, yeah, and that's where so that Fund 400 right now, that's I made a little note here. That is where our construction excise tax is going into, and it's separated. Everything's separated by a sub area at the very end, so that way we can track kind of where things are. But I think that wraps that one up. Any questions on that? Lovely material. Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. So after reviewing all that, is that going to be too much info, not enough info, any input?
So the point of this was so that this is how we will get the budget pages from now on in our packet, so we can figure it out. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Just to be able to explain what it is you're seeing in the board packet. Because I know it's a lot of information and it's, once it's explained, it makes sense. But when you just look at it, it's kind of hard to discern what it is you're looking at. So
leave it to interpretation for you guys to figure out. So we didn't want to blindly lead you. So this is part of our new format that the district has adopted into it. We've been playing with it for a while and it just was a little early to put it in front of you before now, just because we were still learning. Well, not me. She was still learning. We is after fact, you know. So that's why when Amanda talked to, there's other months that we said, oh, but it just, we needed a little bit more time. So yeah, this is how it will be. And it feels real clear. And this is something that we hope that we can put like on the website with explanation at some point too. And then because it is public record, all of this is public record. And then hopefully there is some other gadgets that I really like in there. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to use those as time goes on too. I actually saw this at one of the conferences, and I sent a picture. I feel sorry for them because they always get like, do we do this? Can we do this? You know, kind of thing. And this was another district used this that was in a really bad situation financially, and adopted this so they could see the ongoing of the improvement areas or the areas they needed to improve. And it just was so clear. And once it's explained to you, because this system has so many things that we can do with it. I haven't learned hardly any of it. And I know Amanda's eyes got to be just like all the time because everything's so small and tiny, but yet there's so many things to do. But I just thought this would be great. And you can put your own colors in it, so that it makes it ours. This will be great in the future for like when you go to do a bond or anything like that, because they have all different kinds of resources within there to do financial graphs and things like that. I'm a graph person. I like visuals. This is a very nice visual. Thank you. You do such a great job.
This be the only time that you talk us through like this, or can you do this every month for a while?
Yeah, you can always ask questions. And as we're, going through, I'm happy to, go through whatever page you want during the board meeting and ask any questions. So absolutely. Yeah. As long as you guys need to, and you're always welcome to come in too, if you have any particular questions, in between times.
Will you have things like this for the budget meetings?
Yes, lots of them. I have to figure out, exactly which ones, how we're going to be putting that together. But yeah, hopefully this year for the budget meetings, we'll be able to have, incorporate a lot more graphs and, easy to understand formats of, what's being budgeted where it was last year, et cetera. So yes, hopefully, yeah, lots of that.
Thank you for the vision and thank you for implementation of this. This is the first time I didn't have to hold my laptop and find the angle. No.
You are welcome.
Oh, I know. Well, this is great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the explanation and holding our hands all the time when it comes to this.
We may have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry, second. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you.